Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as we get excited for the next gardening season. So let's go. The first thing you might have noticed is I'm wearing glasses. The second thing you might be noticing is my voice is hoarse. I've been fighting a cold for the last week and I'm slowly on the mend. I have been resting a lot. And also, I ended up getting conjunctivitis, which I guess can happen when you have a cold. So I just wanted to let you know that I'm feeling much better, but I think it's probably another week until I'm fully recovered. But thank you for anyone that's written me and wishing me well. I truly appreciate it. I haven't been making as many videos because I've been sick, but I've been gardening every day. I've been in my garage a lot of this time, and I've just been continuing to empty out pots and continue with the overwintering process of different plants, bulbs, corms, and tubers. So for today's video, I wanted to go over a poll that I put out a few days ago, and I figured while I go over that poll, I'm going to be emptying out some pots that were up along my front walkway that had a bunch of tubers in them. The tubers have been hit by a frost. In fact, they've been hit by a freeze, and they really need to be taken out of their containers and pots. What prompted me to put the latest poll out there was I wondered, out of all the videos that I make, which ones do you find most interesting on my YouTube channel? There are so many wonderful YouTube channels out there, so many great content creators with so much wonderful information and knowledge to share with all of you. My YouTube channel mostly focuses on how to garden on a budget. So with my latest poll, I asked the question, which one of my videos do you find most useful for your own gardening needs? And it was almost a tie between how to sow seeds, either indoors or using the winter sowing process, as well as how to collect seeds. When it comes to the growing the plants indoors under lights, I've been doing that for a lot of years, and I keep learning every single year and improving my process. And I love sharing that with all of you. In regards to the winter sowing process, I've been doing that for about 4 or 5 years now. And my process has pretty much stayed the same, and I've been very successful with the process. In terms of collecting seeds, I've been doing that for a number of years, well over 20 years. And what I've found is there's information out there, but I haven't found like one resource when it comes to how to collect the seeds of different plants. So I'm really working hard on getting my channel to have a nice library where people can go to when it comes to how to collect the seeds from different annuals as well as perennials. The percentage was on the lower side when it comes to selling plants from home. And I totally get that because I feel like that it's its own niche. It's its own separate, it could be its own separate YouTube channel if I really wanted it to. And I've wondered about that. Should I create my own YouTube channel that has to only do with selling plants from my backyard plant nursery? But I found that some of you find that content interesting, even if you don't intend to have your own nursery. So for right now, I think I'm going to keep it within the same channel. And I totally get it, though, that if it's not of interest to you, then you're not going to watch the video. But I wanted to put it out there just to see about how many of you were interested in that type of content. I know for me, at least 50% of my time during the spring, summer, and fall months has to do with my plant nursery. It's definitely a big part of where I spend my time in my garden. And then the other 50% of my gardening has to do with working out in the garden or working inside. So I think it's a 50-50 split for me when it comes to where I spend my time when it comes to gardening. And then I had a section that was called Other, and I said, drop me a comment if there's other type of videos that you want to see. A number of you mentioned that you like watching all this type of content, which I really appreciate. And then there were some comments that I want to elaborate on in this video. So grab a cup of coffee or some tea, and I'm going to start working on my dahlia tubers pot by pot. And the purpose of this video is to get you planning right now through the fall months into the winter months as we head into next spring. So let's start with collecting seeds. A lot of you are interested in that whole process. So when it comes to collecting seeds, I've mentioned this in many videos, but I think it's worth mentioning again. You can collect seeds from your own yard, from annuals, perennials, as well as vegetables. You can also collect seeds from other people's yards, other gardens, family members, neighbors, friends, public gardens, garden centers, if you ask for permission. You know, a lot of times at the end of season, they're going to throw out their annuals or perennials, and they don't care if you grab seeds from them. So you can always ask. But collecting seeds is a great way to save money. I've loved doing it, and I've made a lot of videos showing my process for collecting seeds. And by the way, when it comes to a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be going over today, I'm going to put links to a whole bunch of stuff down in the description below if I have playlists that have to do with certain things. So be sure to check that out, because I do have a lot of playlists out there having to do with what we're going to go over today. And like I mentioned earlier, when it comes to the playlist, one of my biggest goals is to make it a resource, a library that anyone can go to in like now or as well as in future years when you just need to look up or research something. And that's what's really nice about YouTube also, is on anyone's channel, you can click on the little magnifying glass and you can do a search on a certain topic. And I do that too when I go to other people's YouTube pages and I'm looking for something in particular. I'll just click on that little magnifying glass and do a search, and then I'll easily find whatever video I'm looking for on that person's YouTube channel. So when it comes to collecting seeds, a lot of times people ask me, when I collect the seeds, are they going to be true to the parent plant? From my research, what I've found is if you buy seeds and they say they're open pollinated or heirloom, then the seeds that you collect should be true to the parent. So I know that there are a lot of seed suppliers out there that sell those type of seeds. And that's really if that's important to you. If I was to collect seeds from vegetable plants, then it would be important to me to make sure I'm getting heirloom, the seeds from heirloom plants, because I want to make sure that those tomatoes taste the same every single year, for example. Whereas for me, when it comes to flowers, I'm not as picky. So I like to collect the seeds from, for example, dahlias. And I also like to store my tubers, collect them and store them. But I do think it's fun to collect the seeds, to show you how to collect the seeds, and then to get a new dahlia plant to create it. And maybe I can name it even. So just keep that in mind when it comes to collecting the seeds from different plants. I also want to mention, in a lot of my videos, I repeat myself when it comes to collecting seeds. For example, I tell you that you want to let your seeds dry for 1 week. You want to store them in a cool, dark, dry location. That I like to store them in Ziploc bags, but you can store them in a paper bag or some sort of a container or jar. And the reason I repeat myself is I want to make sure that any new person that's found a particular video knows exactly what to do. And that's really important. I've learned that many of us, including me, need step-by-step instructions. So I like to make sure I include that in all my videos the best that I can. And I've started really doing that over the last, I'd say 6 months to 8 months. I've really tried to be a little more thorough when it comes to step-by-step telling you what to do. So I just wanted to explain why I'm repetitive in those seed collecting videos. And as you're collecting those seeds, make sure you're putting them in a place where mice can't get to them. Because what a shame if you collect all those seeds and you have them in Ziploc bags or paper bags, but then you store them somewhere and then you find out that the mice got to them. So put them in some sort of a container, or not a cardboard box, but something, or an area where the mice just can't get to them. So when it comes to collecting the seeds from different plants, I will continue to just be on the lookout for more seeds from different plants and make videos for all of you, because it seems like you're really enjoying those. And I'm really enjoying those because there are plants that I'm like, whoa, wait, I had no idea that this is what the seed looked like. So it's a lot of fun for me to make those videos. So a lot of you also mentioned that you like my videos where I show you how to sow seeds. And that's an area I'm going to be improving on for this coming winter. I really want to take you in step by step with my process for not only initially sowing those seeds, but carrying it through the season into hardening them off, getting them out in the landscape or in a pot, how to fertilize them, how to deadhead them. I think that's really important, and I want to make sure I'm getting that information to you. And one of you had mentioned that you'd like to see that. And I think that's great. I think that's so important because I think it's pretty easy just to say, here's the seed, and oh, look, this is what the plant looks like. It's sprouted. But actually, how do we take care of that particular plant? What are some problems that occur with that plant, and how do we resolve them? I am just putting this soil back in this pot because I just have too much soil here, which is not a bad thing. I can use all this soil for other projects. Do not throw away your soil every year. Your soil is perfectly fine. All you need to do is recharge it each season. So before we dive more into sowing seeds, I want to throw this out there. I definitely want to garden with you, along with you this winter. I want this to be fun for both you as well as me, and showing you things that are working and things that are not working. And I want to hear from you. I want to know what's working for you during the winter months. What issues are you running into? And maybe together we can resolve those. And it'll make our winter months go by even that much quicker, I feel. So the biggest thing that I want each of you to do if you're planning on starting seeds indoors and this is going to be something that's going to be new to you is I want you to figure out what your average last frost date is. And I want you to write that down. And that is going to be so important when it comes to starting seeds indoors. There are a lot of different places that you can go to on the internet. You just have to do a search on what is my average last frost date, and then you need to put in your zip code. Don't put in your state, for example. You need to actually put in your zip code because it's going to vary. My average last frost date in New Hampshire, here where I live, is going to be different than the average last frost date of someone that lives in the northernmost part of New Hampshire, for example. So I need to look it up based on my zip code. And I can tell you my average last frost date based on my zip code is usually around Memorial Day weekend, somewhere between the middle to end of May. But for you, it might be totally different. So if you plan on starting seeds indoors, you definitely want to know that information. And then if you do want to start some seeds, you need to have seeds. You either have collected them by watching a lot of my videos, which I hope you collected a ton of seeds like I did. And if you haven't, get out there, start watching those videos and start collecting seeds of impatiens and begonias and marigolds and whatever else that I have for videos out there, because there are so many seeds out there to be collected. And start stockpiling all your seeds so that we can grow together this winter. And let's say you don't want to collect seeds, you just want to buy them. That's totally fine too. I'm just happy that you're growing. And so go on the internet, go online, find some reputable sources to buy your seeds from. And you want to do that sooner than later because what happens is seeds do run out. They run out of stock. So if it's very important that you're buying certain seeds of certain plants, you want to make sure you get those. You're going to need some seed starting or potting mix. Different people like to use different things when they start their seeds indoors. I've been using seed starting mix, and that works for me. But I do know other people like to use potting mix, and that works for them. The key is no matter what you use, you want to make sure that your plants are getting the nutrition, the fertilizer that they need as they're getting bigger and growing. Because when you first plant a seed, it doesn't need any fertilizer. Everything it needs to grow is stored inside of that seed. However, as soon as that plant gets its first true leaves, at that point, that plant needs fertilizer, which I think is why some people like to use potting mix that has fertilizer already built in so they don't have to worry about fertilizing their seedlings. Whereas others like myself, I have no problem. I don't mind fertilizing. And regardless if you use more of a potting mix or a seed starting mix, you can buy it or you can make it. Because I grow a lot of things from seed, because I also grow a lot of things in like pots and containers during the season, I need a ton of dirt, a ton of soil. So I do like to make my own seed starting mix. And the ratio of what I use in the seed starting mix for indoors growing versus the ratio of what I use for potting mixes for my pots for outdoor growing versus what I use for winter sowing in the milk jugs, the ratio of material might change, but the main core ingredients is the same. And I will have links to those videos in the description below that go over DIY potting and seed starting mix. And if you've been following my videos, I think you probably saw that the plants that I had, like in my window boxes, my hanging baskets, using my own DIY potting mix, I thought they looked pretty good. And there's going to be so many different variations and formulas on how you can make your own potting mix and seed starting mix. So it's really up to you. There's no like perfect solution out there. It's a matter of what can you get from materials and what do you feel comfortable using. So make sure you start stocking up on your potting mix or seed starting mix. You're going to need something to put your plants in to grow your plants. So pots, containers, cell packs, restaurant to-go containers. And I'm very lucky. I'm able to get a lot of my trays and my 6 cell packs either locally from a garden center where they have a recycling bin. So they are free to me. They're used. All the pots and the trays are used. I need to clean them out, but it's nice that I can get those for free. So you should check with your local garden center. They might have the same type of setup. I've also gone on Facebook Marketplace and I've posted out there if anyone has free containers and pots, and I've gotten a lot of responses that way. I've also searched on Marketplace and I've found people that are selling them for very cheap or saying basically that they're free, come pick them up. So you don't have to spend a ton of money on your seed starting supplies and trays. You can though, some people like to buy some really nice sturdy trays, and I think that's fine if you have like a very small setup and you want to spend the money. I am too cheap to do that, and I'm able to get them for free. So why not? And if they break after a few years, I can throw them away because I know I can get them again. I have family members that like to buy plants and then they give me their pots and trays. I have friends that also give me their stuff for free. So it's really up to you how much you want to spend and how many trays you need. I need a lot of trays. I need a lot of pots. So I can't afford to buy the really fancy, nice ones. You'll need a way to be able to water your plants. So I do like to bottom water a lot of my indoor seedlings. So I like to use solid bottom trays when it comes to watering my plants. But as the plants get larger and I need to add water to those trays, I do like to use a watering can to pour the water into the base of those trays. So you might need some sort of a watering can. You typically don't want to be watering your seedlings from on top of the plants because that can cause a lot of fungal issues, a lot of rotting. You'll need some sort of a fertilizer. I like to use plain old Miracle-Gro that I mix with water, but lots of different options out there for fertilizer. So look into that. You may choose, you want to use some sort of an organic fertilizer. Lots of options. So make sure you have some fertilizer on hand. Fungus gnats are a real thing. So if you are going to grow plants indoors, just know that you might get fungus gnats. They are these little annoying bugs or flies that fly around, and if you get an infestation of them, it's very bad. It's just very annoying. So I like to tell people to buy some mosquito bits as well as yellow sticky traps. Get those in advance just so you have them. And you want to basically take control of those fungus gnats before they take control of you. And I've found that between the mosquito bits as well as the yellow sticky traps, I can keep a pretty good handle on those darn fungus gnats. I do like to sterilize my seed starting mix, and I found that that helps as well because a lot of times potting mix as well as seed starting mix can already have fungus gnat eggs inside of them. So I found that that also is helpful. And the key, more than anything else, is to not love your plants too much. Do not overwater them. That's going to cause a lot of problems for your plant, but it also encourages those fungus gnats to breed and to come alive. So don't water your plants too much. You want to let them dry out in between waterings, which is yet another reason why you would be bottom watering your plants. So once you have all your seeds, either that you've collected or that you've bought or both, you start organizing the seeds and come up with a system that works for you. I've made videos showing you the process that works for me when it comes to organizing my seeds. And I know that there's so many different ways you can organize your seeds. Some people like to write down the date that they plan on sowing their seeds based on what it shows on the seed packet. So for example, if it says that you're supposed to sow the seeds 4 weeks before your average last frost date, well, they look at what their particular average last frost date is, they count backwards 4 weeks, and they put that date on their seed packet. And they do that to all their seed packets, and then they store them according to those dates so that they know exactly on a certain window of time which seeds should be started. Other people, like myself, have a spreadsheet. And like I like to keep track of all of my plants in that spreadsheet. And I know actually some of you have asked me for a copy of that spreadsheet. I'll be working on that once things quiet down for me, and I'll find a way to get that out to you in case you're interested in looking at that spreadsheet. So be on the lookout for that in the future. So again, lots of different ways to organize your seeds, but I highly recommend you come up with a system. And if that system, for whatever reason, doesn't work well for you, find a different system and just be organized with how you're doing things. It's going to make your life so much easier. If you haven't already, I suggest that you buy a packet of garden markers. I buy them on Amazon. I really like them. I used to use Sharpies when it came to labeling a lot of my plant labels. And what I found was once the plants went outside and due to the elements of either the sun or the rain, I lost the names of what my plants were. And the garden marker, I found it works much better than a Sharpie or a pen. So definitely invest in some garden markers. You are going to want to label your plants because let's say you have 5 different varieties of tomatoes. You do want to know what kind of tomatoes each one is, otherwise they all look the same. So you'll want some sort of plant labels or plant tags or some sort of a tape that you can tape on the outside of your pot. Lots of different ways that different people do it, but you definitely want a way or a system for labeling your trays, your containers, or your pots. I like to use restaurant to-go containers. So like, when you go out to eat and you don't eat all your food and they give you a container to put your food in, it's usually like plastic and it has a clear cover on it. I like to clean them out and I like to reuse those. I really like to use them for what's called multi-sowing or mass sowing. So when I have a ton of seeds, especially like little small seeds, I like to just put them all in a restaurant to-go container, like let's say impatient seeds. I can sprinkle a whole ton of them in that little restaurant to-go container, put the humidity dome on, and when they germinate, then I can prick them out and put the little seeds into 6 cell packs, let's say. Is it more tedious? Yes, it is. But what I like about that process is basically only the viable seeds are going to germinate. And I'm saving a lot of space under my lights initially versus if I sow even 2 or 3 seeds in my 6 cell packs, for whatever reason, if only a few of them sprouted, I have all this wasted space, not only in that 6 cell pack, but like let's say a whole tray. Versus if I basically multi-sow them in a restaurant to-go container, I'm only pricking out the seeds that are going to germinate. So that's why I'm mentioning that you might want to get some restaurant to-go containers and see if that process works for you. You'll want a fan. A fan is good for air circulation. It dries up the top of the soil so it's not wet, which is really good for the plant. It also makes it so that when there's like air movement around your plant, it makes the stems thicker and sturdier. They're not so spindly and weak. So a fan is always a good thing to have in your grow room. I just use an oscillating tabletop fan, and that's worked well for me. but there are a lot of different options out there when it comes to a fan. And then the final thing that I wanted to keep for the end was grow lights. Now, when I say grow lights, they don't necessarily need to be lights that are labeled as grow lights. A lot of people have been using LED shop lights, and that includes myself. I've been using LED shop lights for a number of years, and I can tell you that the plants that you're growing inside are going to be nice and sturdy and strong. So you just want to make sure that you're looking for certain things when you're buying those grow lights. I have a whole video on my setup that I have in my kitchen area for my grow lights, and I'll link that down below. But the biggest thing I want to tell you is you can adjust your system to fit your needs. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It just needs to be a set of lights. And that's the main thing you need. Don't feel like you have to go out and purchase a 5-tier shelving unit or shelving rack like I have and like many other people on YouTube have. It has to do with how much can you afford, how much space do you have, how much do you want to grow. So I don't want you to feel like you have to buy anything elaborate or fancy. The big thing you need some sort of lights. So usually you can buy like LED shop lights from Home Depot or Lowe's, Sam's Club, Walmart. They cost somewhere around $20, and that's all you need. And then you need to be able to like hook them up. Somehow just have them suspended or hanging down. So it doesn't need to be anything fancy. I do like to have my lights on a timer, but you don't need a timer. It just makes your life easier, but it's not a necessity. I do have extension cords, but you don't need extension cords if you don't want to. But it's all in that video that I'm going to link down below. The one thing I will say, though, is I did not buy linkable LED shop lights, and I wish I did. So if you are going to build some sort of grow light system, I recommend getting the linkable LED shop lights. And I'm not going to go into detail about Kelvin and lumens, and that's a whole other thing. But in that video, I do go over what I'm using for my grow lights. So while we're on the topic of starting plants from seed, let's transition to outdoors. There are a couple of different ways you can do this. The easiest way is to collect your seeds and sprinkle them outdoors. So for example, perennials, you can easily do that. Most perennials, you don't need to cover them actually. They actually need light to germinate. But even some annuals can easily be started outdoors as well as vegetables. So there's a whole list of that. And again, this video is not to go over all of that, but just know that that's an option if you don't want to get into the whole grow light thing. You can either buy your plants or you can sprinkle them outside. Now, certain plants like eggplant or peppers, especially here where I live, I can't do that. Like I can't take a pepper seed and just sprinkle that outside. It takes so long to grow a pepper plant. I would have to either buy it or I'd have to start it from seed indoors. But I do like to use what's called the winter sowing method. And I've been doing it for a number of years. I've had a lot of success with it. I personally love to use it for my perennials because I don't want to give up a lot of my grow lights space indoors for perennial plants. I want to really use those for annual flowers as well as vegetables. But when it comes to winter sowing, absolutely. You can do perennials, you can do annual flowers, you can do herbs, and you can even do vegetables. It's all a matter of knowing when to start each of those. And it's going to vary for all of us depending on where we live. But the typical rule of thumb with winter sowing is you want to start it after the winter solstice. And the first thing that you can winter sow at that time is perennial seeds. And that's when I start my winter sowing process. It's right around the winter solstice, so right around the end of the year. And I can winter sow perennial seeds for a few months after that process has started. But those perennial seeds, they need what's called a cold stratification period. So you want to make sure that you're sowing those perennial seeds early enough so they get that window of time to be stratified outside. And I go over that again in my videos when we do our winter sowing process. If you do want to winter sow, you're going to need some sort of container to hold your soil. I love to use milk jugs, and I get it. Maybe you want milk jugs, but you don't drink milk. Did you know you can actually go to a coffee shop and you can ask them, and they might actually save milk jugs for you? I've done that before with Starbucks, and they saved a whole bunch of milk jugs for me. Normally, when my kids are home, we drink a lot of milk, but when they go off to college, we just don't go through milk as much. So I was desperate. I needed milk jugs, and Starbucks hooked me up. So definitely ask your coffee shop and start collecting now. Like now is the time. And that's one of the biggest reasons I wanted to make this video was to tell you to start collecting your winter sowing milk jugs or whatever else you're gonna, however else you want to do your winter sowing with. In fact, I've been saving all of our milk jugs since last winter, so I have a huge supply of them, which is really nice. Some other ways that you can winter sow, I've seen people use large gallon-sized Ziploc bags. I've seen clear totes. I haven't done either of those methods, but maybe you have, and drop a comment down in the comment section if you've used something other than milk jugs and how it's worked for you. You are going to need some sort of soil. Again, I like to DIY my own potting mix. You don't want to use seed starting mix when you're winter sowing. You definitely need something a little bit heftier than that. So you do need some sort of potting mix when it comes to winter sowing. By the way, between all the potting soil that I use for my pots and containers, for my winter sowing, for starting seeds indoors, potting up seeds that I started, plants that I started indoors, that's why I'm saying I make my own because it gets super expensive otherwise. And it's not that hard to make your own. I really encourage you to try it if you've never tried it before, especially if you plan on gardening on a larger scale. You want to use duct tape to be able to seal up your milk jugs. But if you're not going to use milk jugs and you're going to use something else like the storage bins, or if you're going to use Ziploc bags, you don't need the duct tape then. Duct tape is mostly if you're going to use something like the milk jugs. Remember the garden marker I asked you to look into buying? Well, it's going to come in handy for winter sowing. So you want to make sure you have a garden marker because you are going to be labeling both the outside as well as the inside of your container or your milk jug. I like to use a multi-purpose or a hand sprayer because after I put the seeds in my milk jug, I do need to put water in there. So I like to then just spray the top of the soil with a hand sprayer. So you do need some way of watering the seeds into your milk jug or whatever you're using for winter sowing. And then finally, you need something to make holes in the bottom of your milk jug or your tote. So you can use a Dremel, a screwdriver, box cutter, whatever you have handy that's safe and that allows you to make drainage holes in the bottom of your container. So there was a lot of interest in overwintering plants. And they can be plants that are like, that create a corm, a tuber, a bulb, or it could be just a plant that doesn't produce any of that, but you still want to overwinter it because it's not hardy in your area. Sometimes people have perennials that they just didn't get into the ground and they want to overwinter those. So there's a lot of interest when it comes to how to protect a plant during the winter months. And there's a huge list, but some of the more popular plants that I've seen are dahlias, pelargoniums, which are geraniums, tropical plants. We have canna lilies, calla lilies, elephant ears, caladiums, hibiscus, lantana, impatiens, begonias, gladiolas, peacock orchids, coleus, and mums, and fuchsia. So I know that I'm missing a bunch because it depends on where you live and what's hardy in your area and what's not. For example, let's take dahlias. Dahlias are definitely not hardy here where I live, zone 5B. But if you live in zone 8 or zone 9, you can most likely overwinter dahlias in the ground, which is so awesome. You're very lucky that you can do that. But I can't do that, so I need to dig them up. So there is a lot of interest in wanting to know how to overwinter all of these types of plants. So again, this video is not like going to give instruction on how to overwinter each of those plants. I have tried to show you in previous videos how to overwinter some of those plants, so definitely check them out. But just know that there are so many different ways you can overwinter a particular plant. And it really depends on where you live, your climate, and all of those type of factors. Some people like to overwinter their plants indoors and enjoy them during the winter months. And so I'm going to call that overwintering a plant and keeping it awake. So you can basically take a potted plant like a coleus or impatiens, begonia, and you could bring it inside and put it in a south-facing window where it's nice and sunny, where you've kind of cleaned off the plant, you've checked for all the bugs, and you're going to enjoy the blooms on that plant possibly. It could be even like a geranium. And personally, that's not for me. I don't want to take care of a house plant like that. But I know that some people enjoy that, and that's totally fair game. I think part of the reason I don't like to do it is I just want a small reprieve, a small break before my seed starting begins. And also, I just don't want to deal with the initial possibility of bringing those pests in. No matter how much you clean that plant off, you still take a chance of bringing pests in. Other people like to take cuttings from plants. There's lots of plants that you can do that with. And some examples would be wax begonias, your fuchsias, lantana. You can do that with coleus, New Guinea impatiens. Again, there are a lot of plants you can take cuttings from and basically overwinter the plant indoors so that it's kind of like alive during the winter months. But then there are times when you want to overwinter a plant and you want it to basically go to sleep. You want it to be dormant. And you can overwinter it in a pot where you're just taking the pot, you're bringing it in somewhere, and where it's just going to like be asleep. And you're not going to water the pot. And eventually, as the weather starts to warm up again and you see some growth in that pot, you start waking up the plant by giving it water, by giving it light. And I like to do that in my garage. My garage does not freeze during the winter months. It gets down as low as about 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So I do like to have a lot of plants in my garage that are basically in a dormant state. And I'm checking on them, and I might be giving them the smallest amount of water just to basically keep them alive, but I don't want them to wake up. I don't give them any light. I just make sure they're not freezing, and I make sure that they're not drying out fully. And not everyone has a garage. And if they do have a garage, their garage might not be attached to the house. Mine is attached to the house. That's why it doesn't freeze. But you want to make sure that if you're going to overwinter a plant and you want it to be dormant, that you're putting it somewhere where the plant is not going to freeze, but also where it's not too warm. Because if it's too warm, well, then the plant is not dormant. The plant is still going to want to live. So you want to make sure that you research the plant that you're trying to overwinter, and you want to look up the temperature range for keeping that plant dormant during the winter months. And like I mentioned, some options are an attached garage, a basement. You could do an unheated garage, but you might have to put a heater with it. It really depends on where you live. Where I live, our winters get down to negative 15 degrees Fahrenheit. So it would have to be an attached garage. It can't be an unattached garage unless I added heat to it. Some people have cool closets. There are a lot of options out there, but it needs to be, again, within a certain temperature range if you're going to overwinter a plant. So I'm going to throw this one out there on the list. This one is called Overwintering a Plant Dormant Outdoors. So for example, perennials. Let's say you bought a perennial and it's hardy in your zone, but you know that you don't want to put it out in your garden right away. You don't know where it's going to go. And the ground is not frozen yet, but you just need to get the plant protected a little bit. So you can overwinter it by healing the pot into the ground. So let's say, for example, this is a perennial plant and I don't want to put it in my garden somewhere. I don't know where I'm going to plant it. I'm going to take this pot and I'm going to put it into like a raised vegetable garden, for example, or into a garden bed that has some space into it. I'm going to dig a hole and I'm going to take this pot and I'm going to sink the pot into the ground. But I want to leave the top part, I'm not covering the whole entire shrub or tree or whatever. I'm just sinking the pot into the ground. And what that's doing is it's protecting all of the roots. So I am overwintering the plant, but I'm overwintering it in the ground, and that's called healing in. So I'm healing in my plant. And that's a great option if you bought some plants at the end of the season that are perennial in your area and you just want to be able to overwinter it. And you don't necessarily want to bring it and put it into your garage. And what I like about that method is then you don't need to check on it. You don't need to water it. Mother Nature will do what she needs to. As long as you're getting some sort of precipitation and snow or rain. I mean, here where I live, what will happen is eventually it freezes outside. So I don't need to water that plant during the winter months. But where you live, if you're going to heal in a plant during the winter months, you may still need to give it some water. It really depends on your location and the amount of precipitation you get. For us, we get freezing weather and we get snow. And so that plant is like, it is sleeping for the winter. So I really like to heal in perennial plants during the winter months. I'd rather do that than bring in those perennial plants into my garage. But if the ground was frozen and I somehow inherited a perennial plant of some kind that's in a pot, then I would bring the plant into my garage to overwinter. Some people do like to overwinter plants in a greenhouse, but most of us don't have a greenhouse. So I really don't talk about that too much in my videos. In New Hampshire, if I even had a greenhouse, it would have to be heated in order for me to overwinter plants. So it's not an option for me, but I know like if you live maybe in a warmer area, you might be able to overwinter your plants in a greenhouse. Or you might have a greenhouse in a cooler area, but you have some sort of heating system hooked up to it. So that is an option, is to be able to overwinter plants in a greenhouse. I do like to overwinter a lot of my plants bare root. For example, the annual geranium or a pelargonium, my dahlias, I like to overwinter these bare root. You don't have to overwinter these type of plants bare root. It's really just an option. And not every single plant can be overwintered bare root. So it's just a matter of knowing which plants can you overwinter bare root, and then how do you do it? How do you prepare those plants for storage? And then how do you wake those plants up in the late winter, early spring months? But for me, storing plants bare root is wonderful. It's basically just check on it once a month, but otherwise there's not a whole lot to do with bare root plants. Now, when it comes to these dahlias, I could have kept them in their pots and stopped giving them water, and they basically fall asleep and be dormant for the winter months. The reason I don't like to do that is, well, it takes up a lot of room in my garage. Plus, I do like to divide my dahlias every year, and if they're in their pots, I'm less likely to divide them in the springtime. But I do like this method of storing my dahlia tubers bare root like this. So because a lot of you mentioned that you're interested in overwintering plants, the one thing I will tell you is if you're going to overwinter a plant in a pot in, let's say, your garage or your basement, I think the number one thing that's going to kill that plant is giving it too much water. That plant is asleep. It is dormant. Unless the plant is indoors as a house plant, then yes, you do need to give it, water frequently. But other than that, any plant that's asleep and dormant for the winter, you really don't want to be loving it too much because you're going to kill it. So if you have plants that you're going to be overwintering, like I will be this winter, I'm going to be overwintering a ton of plants in my garage, and I'll make a separate video showing you what I'm planning to overwinter. Some of it will be an experiment. But many of those plants, they just need the smallest drink of water once a month, and that's it. That's really it, which is nice. It makes our life easier. So just know that overwatering a dormant plant will cause it to rot and die. And then finally, when it comes to all of these plants that you're overwintering, be it bare root or in a pot, you want to make sure you're checking them at least once a month. And you're checking for insect, you're checking for disease, you're checking to see if things need a little bit of water. And what I'm planning to do this winter is I'll do check-ins on all of my plants that I'm overwintering, including my geraniums that I'm overwintering in bags. And why I want to do that is if I make a video showing you what I'm doing, then hopefully you can do the same thing. We can garden together along each other side by side, and it'll just be a reminder for you to check in on your plants as well. So this last section, I'm going to call it free stuff. We talked a little bit about where can you get free cell packs or restaurant to-go containers. There are so many resources out there when it comes to free and when it comes to gardening. So I will always do my best to share with you where I get free stuff from. And if it's not free, it might be cheap. Actually, for example, peat moss. I do like to use peat moss. I know some people don't, and that's fine. One time I bought a bag of peat moss, and right next to it was a bag that was opened, just slightly opened. And the guy was like, oh, that's too bad because now we're going to have to sell this 50% off because the bag is opened. And I said, well, can I just buy it then? He goes, yeah. So I ended up buying it for very cheap, which was really nice. So there are a lot of ways that you can save money and get stuff either free or for cheap. But yes, definitely when it comes to those cell packs, the trays, the pots, look around. Don't be buying those. You can definitely get them for cheap. You can get them cheap every single year. You can buy the nice fancy ones if you want to. You can buy the cheapy ones and keep replacing them every year if you want to. It really depends on you and your budget. And then there's compost. You can make your own compost. Someone had mentioned that, it looks like I get a lot of stuff for free. I do, which is totally awesome and amazing. I get leaves for free, and you might get leaves for free. Collect those leaves. It is work, definitely, to make your compost. It is work. It really depends on if you want hot compost or cold compost. I made a video last year that was pretty detailed, and it wasn't very long, that showed you my process for making compost. I'm planning to, if I have time, make an update video and just reposting that footage from last year. Because I've been sick, I'm not able to make compost right now. If I have time a month from now or so, maybe I'll make some compost, but I just can't make it this minute. So I will put a link to that video down in the description. You don't have to buy compost. You can make your own compost. You don't need a ton of room to make compost. And it's such a great feeling when you make your own. And you can get a lot of free stuff to make your own compost. So I mentioned the leaves, animal manure. You can go on Facebook Marketplace and you can find a lot of people that are giving away free, like horse manure, chicken manure. Just make sure that the animal manure that you're getting is clean, that it doesn't have any sort of antibiotics or anything like that in it. I've gone to Starbucks before and gotten coffee grounds, which is a great green material. I get that for free. So you can definitely hit up local coffee shops for used or old coffee grounds. I've been able to get wood shavings for free from a local lumber yard. Just make sure that the wood shavings are clean, that they're from natural trees. Your own yard waste. So if you're cutting back your perennials, as long as your perennials are not diseased or mildewy, you can definitely use your own yard waste. You can use your kitchen waste. All of my vegetable and my fruit scraps, all of that goes out into my compost pile. Paper bags from grocery stores, or even if we go out to eat, sometimes they'll give us our to-go, restaurant to-go containers in a paper bag. I just put that through our paper shredder, and that goes into the compost pile. So another free thing that you can get is wood pallets. And I know of a few places locally where you can get wood pallets for free, but I've also seen it on Facebook Marketplace. So if you're like driving and on the side of the road, you see wood pallets, most likely they're out there because they're free. You might need to ask and double check, but oftentimes if a local business doesn't want their wood pallets that they got from some sort of a shipment, they'll just put them at the side of the road there. And that's what I used to create my own compost bin. And I know a lot of people have used wood pallets for compost bin. And you can also use wood pallets in your gardening landscape for making a nice path walkway or something like that. You can use wood pallets to start vegetables in. There are so many things you can do with wood pallets. If you just looked up on the internet, DIY wood pallets in the garden, you get so many great ideas. So that's another great free thing that you can get when it comes to gardening. I mentioned in many videos that I get free compost from my local transfer station. And I get it that maybe you might not be able to get that, which is exactly why I'm telling you it's not that hard to make your own compost. And when it comes to that free compost that I get from the transfer station, I'm not using it to grow my vegetables in or even to grow like a lot of my annual flowers in. I'm mostly using it for my backyard plant nursery for my perennial plants. And I'm perfectly happy. I'm fine with it. It's not the best compost. I definitely have to sift out material from it, but free is free. So you should definitely check with your local transfer station and see if you can get compost for free from there. Again, just know that it might not be the best, but it's something. Wood chips are also another free resource that you can typically get. You can reach out to local arborists and see if they can deliver wood chips to you. You can sign up for a chip drop and see if you can get wood chips that way. Maybe you have trees on your property, and unfortunately, I know it's expensive to have trees cut down, but it might be a necessity that you have to do anyway. So you might as well ask them to save your wood chips for you and then just tell them where you want them to place those wood chips on your property. A lot of people like to use those wood chips for mulching in their flower beds. Other people like to use them as walkways within a garden space. There are lots of different uses for them. And you can even use them in your compost pile as a brown material, but just know that they take a lot longer to break down because, they're a little bit on the bigger side. So here's a good one. Do I get plants for free? Yep. But where do I get the free plants from? I get the free plants from end of the season when, for example, my sister-in-law is done with her container pots and the plants in there are going to die anyway. Then I get plants from there. I put it on Facebook Marketplace. Does anyone have canna lilies or begonias, tuberous begonias? And I got some responses as well as geraniums, the annual type, the pelargoniums. So I did get them for free, but it's not the type of free that you might think. It's not like from a flower distributor or a company like that. It's more just, it's the end of the season and people are going to just throw away their annuals. So I want to overwinter them, either bare root or in a pot. So I'm putting this one out there as the last one, but I think it's a really good one. Go on Facebook Marketplace or go to a local garden club. Maybe they're cleaning out a flower bed and they have really nice geraniums that are just going to die anyway. That's what happened to me. My friend told me that their garden club was going to clean out a flower bed, and she said, come take what you want. And I went to town and I got all of those plants for free. And if none of them survive, then that's totally fine. But if a few of them survive, I'll be really happy. So definitely look for free stuff because there is free stuff out there to be had. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it was a little different. I want to be out in my garden. I'm hoping to be soon enough, but this is all gardening that needs to be done anyway. So I'm glad that we got to tackle it together. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please drop them down in the comment section below. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.